How much would you pay for a single night of undisturbed sleep, especially when the cries of 3 infants echo through a mansion? Patricia, a self-made millionaire in the bustling heart of Nairobi, stared at the elaborate cradle, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. Her triplet granddaughters, Tumaini, Nima, and Baraka, beautiful as they were, had turned her meticulously ordered world into a symphony of sleepless nights and frayed nerves. Every pediatrician, every nanny, every old wives' tale had failed. The silence she craved felt like a distant, impossible dream. The mahogany walls of her spacious nursery, adorned with playful murals of Kenyan wildlife, seemed to mock her with their cheerful facade. Outside, the city hummed with life, a stark contrast to the desolate quiet within Patricia's soul. She had conquered boardrooms, negotiated multi-million-dollar deals, and built an empire from scratch. Yet these 3 tiny beings, barely a few months old, had rendered her utterly powerless. Her usual sharp intellect was dulled by exhaustion, and her once unshakable resolve wavered with each whimper. A tear, unbidden, traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't just the lack of sleep. It was the gnawing fear that she was failing them, failing her late daughter's legacy. She wanted to give them the world, but all they seemed to want was peace, a peace she desperately craved herself and couldn't provide. The immense wealth she possessed felt utterly useless against the primal, relentless need of her granddaughters for comfort, for sleep. Patricia paced the polished marble floors of her living room, the city lights twinkling outside like unsympathetic eyes. Her vast wealth, usually a source of comfort and power, now felt like a gilded cage. She had offered increasingly exorbitant sums to anyone who could soothe her granddaughters to sleep, a desperate plea broadcast through her network, a testament to her utter defeat. Nannies, child psychologists, even traditional healers from the countryside had come and gone, their faces etched with polite apologies and thinly veiled frustration. The staff, usually efficient and discreet, moved with a newfound quietness, their glances a mixture of sympathy and bewilderment. They had seen Patricia face down corporate raiders and political adversaries, but this was different. This was raw maternal helplessness, a vulnerability they had never witnessed. Patricia, usually so composed, found herself snapping at trivialities, her nerves stretched thin as a drum. The laughter that once filled her home had been replaced by a pervasive, unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the occasional wail from the nursery. She remembered her own struggles as a young mother, balancing a burgeoning business with raising her daughter. But even then, there was a sense of control, a belief that solutions could be found. With the triplets, it was different. It was an enigma, a relentless tiny storm that no amount of money or influence could quell. The irony was bitter. She had everything, yet the one thing she truly yearned for, a good night's sleep for her beloved granddaughters, remained agonizingly out of reach. News of the millionaire's plight, as such things often do in Nairobi, began to filter through the city's informal networks. Whispers of Patricia's sleepless nights, the extravagant rewards offered, and the procession of failed specialists spread like wildfire. Some saw it as a curious anomaly, a rich woman's problem. Others, particularly those struggling to make ends meet, scoffed at the idea of money being unable to solve such a seemingly simple problem. Sleep? They pay millions for sleep? One market vendor muttered to another, shaking her head. The local tabloids, always eager for a human interest story involving the elite, began to publish speculative pieces. Patricia's triplets, a mystery of the mansion, read one headline, accompanied by a grainy photo of Patricia looking uncharacteristically disheveled. The articles, while mostly sympathetic, added another layer of pressure to Patricia's already overwhelming burden. She felt exposed, her private agony laid bare for public consumption, her perceived failures magnified by the media's lens. Yet amidst the chatter and the gossip, there was also a strange undercurrent of empathy. Many mothers, regardless of their financial status, understood the desperate exhaustion of sleepless nights with an infant. They might not have millions to offer, but they knew the visceral ache of wanting to comfort a crying child. Unbeknownst to Patricia, her public struggle was beginning to stir something unexpected in the diverse tapestry of Nairobi, a silent, collective recognition of a universal human experience. One sweltering afternoon, as Patricia's driver navigated her armored Mercedes through the labyrinthine streets of downtown Nairobi, a figure appeared abruptly in their path. The brakes screeched, and Patricia, jolted from her anxious reverie, looked up sharply. It was a man, thin and weathered, his clothes threadbare, holding out a gnarled hand through the open window, a silent plea for alms. His eyes, though weary, held an unusual depth, an almost unsettling calm. Her driver, a stern man named Juma, was about to wave him away with a curt gesture, but Patricia held up a hand. There was something about the beggar, a stillness that cut through the usual clamor of the city. He wasn't aggressive, didn't shout or demand. He simply stood there, his gaze fixed on her. Patricia, in her designer suit, felt a strange, inexplicable pull towards this man who seemingly had nothing. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, the desperation blurring the lines of her usual discernment. She lowered the window a fraction, the roar of the city traffic momentarily fading. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. The man simply looked at her, then slowly, deliberately, pointed a finger towards the back of the car, where the triplets' empty car seats were usually visible. He didn't speak, but his gesture, oddly precise, seemed to hint at an awareness of her secret burden. Patricia felt a shiver run down her spine, not of fear, but of an odd, dawning premonition. The beggar finally spoke, his voice surprisingly soft, almost a murmur against the backdrop of the city. "Your little ones? They struggle with the night, don't they?" Patricia's eyes widened. How could he possibly know? She hadn't been to this part of town in weeks, and her car windows were tinted. It was a bold, almost impertinent question, yet devoid of malice. Juma bristled, ready to intervene, but Patricia remained frozen, her gaze locked with the man's. "How do you know that?" she demanded, her guard instinctively rising. The man offered a small, knowing smile, revealing gaps where teeth once were. "The city whispers many things, rich madam, and sometimes the spirits tell us what the living cannot see." He paused, then continued. "I can help them sleep." Patricia scoffed inwardly. Another one. She had heard variations of this claim from charlatans and well-meaning but useless experts, yet something in his quiet confidence, so unlike the desperate promises she'd encountered, made her hesitate. "What do you want in return?" she asked, expecting a demand for money, a large sum perhaps, to match her supposed desperation. The man shook his head slowly. "Not money, madam. Money is a fleeting comfort. I ask for something else, something you have in abundance but do not share." He gestured vaguely around them at the bustling street, the people, the life flowing past. Patricia felt a flicker of annoyance, then a deeper curiosity. What could she, a millionaire, possibly possess that he, a beggar, would desire more than money? The beggar then lowered his gaze, and his voice took on a more reflective tone. "I've seen the worry in your eyes, madam. It's a heavy cloak, heavier than any gold chain. The children feel it, too. They sense the distress, the silence that screams of your desperation." Patricia felt a prickle of discomfort, then a strange sense of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in weeks. He wasn't just observing her outward appearance, he was speaking to the raw, exposed nerves beneath. He continued, "A child's world is built on sound, on rhythm, on the gentle hum of life. Your house, I imagine, is too quiet, too full of the echoes of what is missing." Patricia reeled. Her house, with its soundproofed rooms and hushed corridors, was indeed a fortress against the outside world, a world she had meticulously controlled. But what if, in her quest for order and pristine calm, she had inadvertently created an environment that was jarring, rather than soothing, for three tiny infants? The man looked up again, his eyes meeting hers. "I can bring them the sounds they need. The lullaby of the street, the whisper of the wind through leaves, the song of a mother's heart, even if it's not their own." Patricia stared at him, bewildered. His words were poetic, almost mystical, completely at odds with his tattered appearance. He was not asking for money, or even a grand meal. He was offering an intangible, a connection to the very pulse of life that her mansion, in its sterile perfection, seemed to lack. It was a proposition so absurd, so utterly outside her realm of experience, that it was, paradoxically, compelling. Back in her opulent mansion, Patricia recounted the strange encounter to Juma, who remained skeptical, his face a mask of disapproval. "Madam, with all due respect, he is a street dweller. He could be a con artist, or worse." But Patricia waved away his concerns. "Juma, what do we have to lose? We've tried everything else, every doctor, every nanny, every expensive gadget. Nothing has worked. And he asked for no money." There was a glint of recklessness in her tired eyes, a desperate hope clinging to the most improbable straw. Against Juma's better judgment, and with a host of security protocols put in place, the beggar was brought to the mansion that evening. He seemed unfazed by the grandeur, his eyes taking in the towering ceilings and exquisite art with a quiet detachment. The staff, accustomed to the procession of esteemed guests, watched with a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled judgment as the tattered man was led through their pristine halls. Patricia herself felt a surge of apprehension, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. As he entered the nursery, the air seemed to shift. The triplets, usually restless even in their sleep, stirred faintly, but did not immediately wail. He did not approach the cradles directly. Instead, he simply stood in the center of the room, closed his eyes, and took a deep, resonant breath. Patricia watched, her heart hammering against her ribs, as a profound silence descended, different from the usual anxious quiet of the house. It was a silence that felt expectant, almost sacred. Then, he began to hum. It wasn't a tuneful melody in the conventional sense, but a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards. It was a sound that spoke of distant drums, of wind whistling through vast plains, of the gentle murmur of a hidden stream. It was the music of the earth, primal and ancient, completely unlike the saccharine lullabies Patricia had played on expensive sound machines. The triplets, who had been on the verge of stirring, settled back into their slumber, their tiny bodies relaxing almost imperceptibly. Patricia watched, mesmerized, as the beggar, whose name she now realized she didn't even know, continued his unusual performance. He didn't touch the babies, didn't rock the cradles. He simply stood there, a conduit for some unseen force, filling the room with a resonance that seemed to bypass their ears and speak directly to their souls. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, silent environment she had meticulously crafted for them, and yet it was undeniably effective. After what felt like an eternity, but was perhaps only 20 minutes, the humming faded, leaving behind a profound, almost tangible peace. The triplets were deeply asleep, their breaths soft and even. Patricia approached the cradles, touching a tiny cheek, feeling the warmth of their peaceful slumber. A wave of emotion, so potent it almost brought her to her knees, washed over her. It wasn't just relief, it was a revelation. Her millions couldn't buy this, her power couldn't command it. It was a gift from an unexpected source, a lesson whispered by the very air. Patricia turned to the beggar, her eyes shining with unshed tears of gratitude. How did you do that?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. He opened his eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. "It is the sound of life, madam, the sound they miss in these quiet walls. The rhythm of the world outside, brought inside." He then added, "Now, for my payment." Patricia braced herself, wondering what extravagant demand he would make now that he had proven his unique ability. "I do not ask for money, as I said," he reiterated. "I ask for a window to your world, and a window for my world to enter yours. I ask that you invite the life of the city into this place, not just for the children, but for yourself." Patricia frowned, confused. "What do you mean, a window?" The beggar gestured towards the grand, tightly sealed windows of the nursery. "Open them. Let the sounds in. The laughter of children playing, the distant call of a street hawker, the melody of a shared song. Let the world breathe with your home." He continued, "And for me, I ask for a story. Not a story of wealth or power, but a story of kindness. A story of a shared meal. A story of a moment of true human connection, beyond the walls you have built around yourself." Patricia stared at him, completely taken aback. His request was utterly unexpected, a challenge to her very way of life. He wasn't asking for material gain. He was asking for her to lower her defenses, to engage with the world she had so carefully shut out. Patricia, still in a daze of gratitude and wonder, found herself agreeing to the beggar's terms. The next morning, much to the consternation of her head of security and Juma, the large, soundproofed windows of the nursery were opened for the first time in years. The sounds of Nairobi, usually filtered and distant, now drifted in. The cheerful chatter of school children from a nearby school, the distant hum of traffic, the occasional call of a street vendor, even the chirping of birds in her meticulously manicured gardens. Initially, Patricia worried. Would the noise disrupt the babies? Would it be too much? But to her astonishment, the triplets seemed to respond with a subtle but definite calm. Their eyes, when awake, would track the movements of leaves rustling outside, their tiny ears seemingly attuned to the gentle symphony of the city. It was as if a missing piece of their world had finally been put into place. Patricia herself found a strange comfort in the ambient sounds, a sense of being connected to the vibrant life she had long insulated herself from. For his payment, the beggar, who finally introduced himself as Mzee Kamau, spent an hour each evening in the nursery, not just humming, but sometimes softly reciting traditional tales or simple poems, his voice a soothing balm. Afterward, as part of his second request, Patricia would join him for a humble meal in her grand dining room, a surreal scene to anyone who might witness it. Over simple plates of ugali and sukuma wiki, prepared by her bewildered chef Mzee Kamau, would share stories of the city's underbelly of resilience and struggle, and Patricia in turn found herself for the first time in years truly listening, truly connecting. The transformation in the mansion was subtle, but profound. The heavy, almost oppressive silence that had once permeated the air was replaced by a gentle hum of life. The staff, initially wary of Mzee Kamau, began to relax, even smile, as the sound of the triplets' contented cooing became a regular occurrence. Patricia herself seemed to shed years of tension. The lines of worry around her eyes softened, and a genuine smile, unforced and radiant, began to appear more frequently. She even found herself spending less time in her home office and more time simply sitting in the nursery, observing her granddaughters, breathing in the new atmosphere. Her corporate life, once her sole focus, now seemed to share space with a different kind of wealth, the richness of human connection, the simple joy of a child's peaceful sleep. She found herself looking at Nairobi with new eyes, no longer just a backdrop for her business empire, but a vibrant tapestry of lives, struggles, and untold stories. Mzee Kamau, in his quiet, unassuming way, had opened a window not just for the triplets, but for Patricia herself, allowing a fresh breeze of perspective to sweep through her carefully constructed world. The evening meals with Mzee Kamau became a ritual she genuinely looked forward to. He spoke of his life on the streets, of the unspoken rules, the community, the hardships, but also the unexpected moments of beauty and kindness. Patricia, in turn, cautiously began to share snippets of her own life, not of her business triumphs, but of her quiet fears, her hopes for her granddaughters, her longing for genuine connection. The chasm between the millionaire and the beggar, initially vast, began to shrink with each shared story, each moment of quiet understanding. One evening, as Mzee Kamau was humming a particularly haunting melody, Patricia felt an inexplicable sense of déjà vu. The tune, though subtly different, resonated with a deep, almost forgotten memory from her childhood. She had heard it before, long ago, sung by someone else. A faint image flickered at the edge of her consciousness. A woman, her face obscured by time, her voice soft and melodious. The memory was fleeting, elusive, yet powerfully evocative. She asked Mzee Kamau about the song. "That is an old lullaby," he explained, his eyes distant. "My mother used to sing it to me. It speaks of a mother's journey and the comfort she seeks for her child." Patricia pressed him for more details, a growing sense of urgency building within her. "Was your mother from this region? Did she work for anyone wealthy?" Mzee Kamau looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his weary eyes. "My mother worked for many households, madam. She was a mama fua, a washerwoman moving from compound to compound." A cold knot tightened in Patricia's stomach. Her own mother, a strong and often distant woman, had employed a series of washerwomen when Patricia was a child. One particular woman, though she couldn't recall her face, had been especially kind, singing gentle songs as she worked. Could it be? The coincidence seemed too remarkable, too poignant to be dismissed. The rhythmic lullaby, the gentle hands, the fleeting memory. It all began to coalesce into a shape she hadn't dared to consider. The seed of doubt, once planted, began to sprout within Patricia's mind. She found herself observing Mzee Kamau with renewed intensity, searching for any telltale signs, any familiarity in his features. The way he held his hands, the slight tilt of his head when he listened, a certain cadence in his voice. Everything seemed to resonate with that half-forgotten memory of the kind washerwoman. But it was impossible, wasn't it? The chasm between their social standings was immense, insurmountable. She began to discreetly ask her older staff, those who had been with her family for decades, about the washerwomen her mother had employed. Their memories were hazy, fragmented by time. Names were mentioned, but none sparked an immediate recognition. Patricia felt a growing frustration, a desperate need to confirm or deny this unsettling possibility. It was more than just curiosity. It was a profound yearning for a connection to a past she had perhaps overlooked, dismissed, or simply forgotten in her relentless pursuit of success. The thought that this man, this humble beggar who had brought peace to her home, could be connected to her own childhood in such a fundamental way was both exhilarating and terrifying. It challenged her understanding of her own history, her own privilege, and the very fabric of the world she had so carefully constructed. The quiet evenings with Mzee Kamau, once a source of simple comfort, now carried an undercurrent of suspense, a silent question hanging in the air between them. One evening, after the triplets were peacefully asleep, Patricia subtly brought up her childhood, describing the large house, the gardens, the presence of a washerwoman who sang beautifully. Mzee Kamau listened, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke, his voice unusually low. "My mother. Her name was Adisa." The name hung in the air, a bell tolling in Patricia's memory. Adisa. The name was familiar, deeply embedded in a corner of her mind she rarely visited. "Adisa," Patricia repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I remember that name. She was very kind to me." A wave of emotion, raw and overwhelming, washed over her. It wasn't just a memory. It was a feeling, a warmth she hadn't realized she still carried. Mzee Kamau nodded slowly. She spoke of a little girl, bright and curious, who would often watch her work, a girl who loved her songs. He looked directly at Patricia, his eyes piercing through years of social stratification, through layers of wealth and hardship. "You were that little girl, weren't you, Patricia?" The revelation hit Patricia with the force of a physical blow. Her Mzee Kamau, the beggar who had saved her granddaughters, was the son of Adisa, the kind washerwoman who had brought moments of simple joy to her lonely childhood. The truth, once a vague suspicion, now stood stark and undeniable between them. The irony, the poetic justice, the sheer improbability of it all was breathtaking. Her carefully ordered world had just been upended by a connection she had never anticipated, a thread woven through the fabric of time and circumstance. The silence in the dining room was thick with unspoken histories. Patricia, her mind reeling, tried to piece together the fragments. "My mother, your mother, they knew each other." It was a statement of fact, yet loaded with decades of unacknowledged power dynamics. Mzee Kamau confirmed it, his gaze steady. "They knew each other, madam, in the way the rich and the poor often do, a transaction of labor for sustenance. But my mother, she spoke kindly of you." He then revealed more. Adisa, his mother, had been a single parent, struggling to raise her son in the harsh realities of Nairobi. She had found solace and a meager income in working for families like Patricia's. Mzee Kamau, as a young boy, had often waited for his mother outside the grand gates of the estates, catching glimpses of the children playing within, children like Patricia, whose lives were so vastly different from his own. The lullabies his mother sang to him, he now sang to Patricia's granddaughters. The realization brought a fresh wave of tears to Patricia's eyes. Tears not of sorrow, but of profound regret and a dawning understanding. She had grown up oblivious to the struggles of those who served her, had taken for granted the kindness of women like Adisa, whose lives were interwoven with hers in ways she never comprehended. Now, the son of that kind woman, a man she had initially dismissed as a beggar, was sitting across from her, a living testament to the unseen threads that connected their lives. The world, she realized, was far smaller and far more interconnected than her insulated life had ever allowed her to believe. The next few days were a blur of introspection for Patricia. She found herself replaying childhood memories, examining them through this new, painful lens. The grand house, the meticulously kept gardens, the delicious meals, all of it had been made possible by the unseen hands of people like Adisa, people whose lives she had never truly acknowledged. The disparity between her life and Mzee Kamau's, once a distant abstract, now felt immediate and deeply personal. She, with her millions, had lived a life of comfort, while he, the son of a woman who had shown her kindness, had faced hardship and poverty. The guilt was a heavy cloak, but it was accompanied by a strange sense of liberation. The walls she had built around herself, both physical and emotional, suddenly seemed less secure, less necessary. The life she had been living, so focused on acquisition and control, now felt profoundly incomplete. Mzee Kamau, unknowingly, had become a mirror reflecting back to her the parts of herself she had forgotten, the humanity she had perhaps suppressed in her ascent to power. Her interactions with Mzee Kamau shifted again, becoming deeper, more honest. She no longer saw him as just the beggar who helped the babies. He was Kamau, the son of Adisa, a man who carried a living history she was now desperate to understand. She wanted to know everything, about his mother, about his own life, about the struggles and triumphs that had shaped him. The story she had unknowingly asked him for, a story of kindness and human connection, was now unfolding between them, a testament to the enduring power of forgotten bonds. The connection between Patricia and Mzee Kamau deepened, transforming their daily ritual. The lullabies he sang to the triplets took on an even greater significance, a bridge between past and present, between two vastly different worlds now intertwined. Patricia, surprisingly, found herself learning some of the words, humming along, her voice a little off-key but filled with a newfound tenderness. The triplets, nestled in their cradles, seemed to sense the shared harmony, their sleep even more profound. Patricia began to envision a different future, not just for herself, but for Mzee Kamau. She couldn't erase decades of hardship, but she could offer a lifeline, a chance for a different path. She spoke to him, not with pity, but with genuine respect, about opportunities, about a home, about a way to use his unique gift to help others. Mzee Kamau listened, his usual quiet demeanor unchanged. But there was a flicker in his eyes, a spark of hope he had long thought extinguished. The bond forged by a shared lullaby, by the quiet miracle of 3 sleeping infants, had blossomed into something unexpected and profound. It was no longer just about the babies sleeping, it was about 2 individuals from vastly different walks of life finding common ground, rediscovering forgotten connections, and forging a new understanding of what it truly meant to be human. The millionaire and the beggar, once separated by an unbridgeable chasm, were now united by the gentle hum of a shared song and the promise of a future built on compassion. News of Patricia's transformation, and particularly her unusual friendship with Mzee Kamau, slowly began to filter beyond the mansion walls. The tabloids, which had once sensationalized her plight, now published articles cautiously praising her newfound humility and generosity. Her corporate peers, initially bewildered, began to observe a different Patricia in boardrooms, still sharp, but with a newfound empathy and a broader perspective. More significantly, the local community, especially those in the poorer neighborhoods, watched with a mixture of surprise and cautious optimism. Mzee Kamau, once just another anonymous face on the street, was now a figure of quiet inspiration. His story became a tale whispered in the market, a testament to the unexpected ways life could turn. Patricia, no longer seen as just an aloof millionaire, began to gain a different kind of respect, one rooted not in her wealth, but in her humanity. The window Mzee Kamau had asked her to open had in fact opened both ways. Not only had the sounds of the city entered her home, but her story, and Mzee Kamau's, had now entered the heart of the city itself. It was a subtle shift, not a grand revolution, but a quiet, powerful testament to the idea that even the most entrenched social barriers could be transcended by genuine connection and a willingness to see beyond the surface. One morning, Patricia found Mzee Kamau sitting by the open nursery window, not humming, but gently tapping a rhythm on a small, worn piece of wood. The triplets, though awake, were watching him with an almost hypnotic fascination, their tiny hands moving faintly in response to the beat. It wasn't a complex rhythm, but a simple, repetitive pulse, like a heartbeat. Patricia watched, intrigued, as the babies seemed utterly captivated, their usual restlessness absent. Mzee Kamau looked up, a knowing smile on his face. "The children, they need rhythm, madam. The rhythm of life. Your house. It has no rhythm of its own. It is too still." He explained that while his humming provided a melody, the rhythmic tapping offered a foundational pulse, something deep and instinctual that babies crave. It was a concept so simple, yet so profound, that it completely bypassed all the scientific research and expensive gadgets Patricia had tried. This wasn't just about sleep anymore, it was about nurturing. Mzee Kamau, through his inherent understanding of primal human needs, was teaching Patricia a new language of connection. He wasn't just a lullaby singer. He was a master of sensory input, a conduit for the fundamental rhythms of existence. Patricia realized that her mansion, despite its opulence, had been a sensory deprivation chamber in some ways, creating a void that these ancient, simple rhythms could now fill. Inspired by Mzee Kamau's wisdom, Patricia began to imagine a new kind of legacy, not just one of financial empires, but one of holistic well-being. She started to incorporate more natural sounds and rhythms into the triplets' environment. Small, handcrafted musical instruments designed to create gentle, resonant sounds replaced sterile plastic toys. The gardens were redesigned to encourage birdsong and the soothing rustle of leaves. The house itself began to hum with a quiet, natural energy. She even began to explore the possibility of creating a foundation, not just for poverty alleviation, but for promoting early childhood development through traditional music, storytelling, and the understanding of sensory connection. Mzee Kamau, with his innate wisdom, became her informal advisor, his insights proving more valuable than any corporate consultant. The initial crisis of sleepless babies had ignited a spark that was now transforming not just Patricia's life, but potentially countless others. Her granddaughters, Tumaini, Nima, and Baraka, thrived in this new, rhythm-infused environment. They were not just sleeping, they were flourishing. Their little personalities beginning to emerge, their laughter echoing through the mansion, a far cry from the silent anxiety that once filled its halls. Patricia would often sit with them, listening to Mzee Kamau's stories, feeling the gentle pulse of the rhythms, and imagining a future where every child, regardless of their circumstances, could experience the profound comfort of connection to the world around them. Years passed. The triplets grew into bright, curious girls, their early experiences shaping their understanding of the world. They loved the stories Mzee Kamau told, the traditional songs he taught them, and the gentle rhythms that still occasionally played in their home. They understood instinctively the value of connection, of shared humanity, regardless of outward appearance. Patricia, now an older, wiser woman, continued to lead her business empire, but her focus had broadened immeasurably. The foundation she established, Adisa's legacy, became a beacon of hope, providing resources and education on early childhood development, emphasizing the power of sensory experiences, traditional arts, and community connection. Mzee Kamau, no longer a beggar, but a respected elder and integral part of the foundation, shared his wisdom with countless parents and caregivers, his quiet dignity and inspiration to all. He had a modest home now, a comfortable life, but still visited the mansion regularly, his presence a grounding force. The story of the millionaire and the beggar, of the sleepless triplets and the ancient lullabies, became a legend whispered through Nairobi. It was a tale of unexpected connections, of the power of empathy, and of the profound truth that the greatest wealth often lies not in what one possesses, but in the bridges one builds between hearts. And in the quiet corners of Patricia's grand mansion, the gentle hum of life, the echoes of a shared lullaby, and the laughter of 3 thriving granddaughters continued to weave a beautiful, unfolding tapestry of a life lived with purpose and profound connection.